I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on earth. And now only those who loved them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel. And be less quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering this special dash might only last a while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they said about how you spent your dash? Well, this series is really all about that. It's all about our dash, right? The time that you and I get to spend here on planet Earth. And today in particular, we're really going to lean into that. Like we've said the past 2 weeks, a lot of times we're preoccupied with the beginning, right? This is true with the Bible. People have all these questions from those first chapters of Genesis. It's true when a baby's born, right? Everybody celebrates and wants to see and visits and all those things. We're preoccupied with that. We're preoccupied with the end. When we kind of are nearing our end, or those we know and love are nearing their end, we're preoccupied in some ways with the end of the Bible as well. And this is, again, just true. And I've been telling you guys, preoccupations are okay, right? Like, we all have preoccupations. Not every single thing that we do or think about in life has to matter most. That's okay to an extent. But most or much of what our lives are made up of should matter. Amen? Right? Like, we want to do stuff that leads to something more. And so instead of living in a way where we are preoccupied, let's live on purpose. Let's live intentional. Let's make sure we focus our lives and do what we know matters and matters to God. So like we've said, right? Like this whole idea of God has been so clear. Like we as people of faith ought to be helpful and we ought to be holy. Right? We ought to be present and making a difference, and we ought to be the presence of God, and we should become more and more like Jesus. Like people should see less of Rob and more of Jesus over time. And if we're not becoming sort of more of that, we got to really wonder. We get so preoccupied with all these things that ultimately we don't know and don't matter, and yet we neglect all the simple things that God has for us and has made it so clear for us to do. So let's focus on making our dashes as potent as possible, because that's what we really want to do. Which leads me to what I want to talk about today. And today we're going to talk about a term that is not found at all in the Bible, but the concept is literally everywhere throughout the Scriptures. And it's legacy. Now that word legacy sounds sometimes like it's big and fancy, but it's actually really, really simple. And so legacy, all it really means is this: something that is passed on. This is what legacy is, right? It's something that we pass on. And this can take many forms. We can pass on our faith, or our ethics, or our code of conduct, or our core values. Someone's legacy, a part of that can be monetary or asset-based, right? If you have things that you leave or you pass on to someone after you're gone, that could be a part of a legacy. A legacy may come from a person's character or reputation and the life they lead, really setting an examples that for others to follow or that guides people in the future. And so just a couple things as we start to think about this term, legacy, we all pass something on, right? We all do. Rob, I haven't lived well, I don't really have a connection with my relatives or kids. I've made some bad. Okay, you're gonna, if you were to end right now, that's what you would pass on. We all pass something on. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but we all pass something on. And really just another way to say that is this: everyone leaves a legacy. Every single person, whether you thought about it, whether you a little bit, a lot, not at all, everyone does this. And again, I understand, depending on your age, you may have thought very little about legacy to this point. A lot of times in our 20s and 30s, unless you have some crazy things happen, we don't think much about this. You start getting a little older, you start thinking more about it. And yet, it's so critical that we think about this. And so here's a question I want to ask us. What legacy will you leave? That's really the question for today. What legacy will you leave? And like I already mentioned, we don't find that word or that term legacy in the Bible, but the idea and concept are everywhere. And so after sifting through a bunch of passages this week, there was one in particular that seemed especially pertinent to me because it's easy to grasp, like we're all going to understand it instantly, and it has two very simple ideas. And so here it is, it's Proverbs 13:22, and it says this: a good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. Very interesting, right? Good or bad, godly or not, everyone leaves a legacy. One is just drastically different than the other. And here is really, really good news. Nobody else gets to decide what your legacy is except for you, right? You have 100% control over your legacy. Right? No one gets to determine this for us. We get to decide. I decide my legacy. You decide your legacy. And listen, I get it. It's not easy. And certainly there are people out there who would love to sabotage us and our legacy. That is just true. We live in a world full of that. But as you think about what you will leave behind, what you will pass on, let me just ask, which of these two broad categories would you like your legacy to fall into? The first one is this: something that lasts. Something that lasts. What does our proverb say? A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. That's interesting, right? It's not just, hey, if you're good, if you're godly, you'll leave something, a little something for your kids. No, like the idea is that if we live as God has instructed us to live, what our legacy is will be a generational thing. And again, this is good or bad, right? Like the scriptures also talk about the sins of the father, right? So like if you are sinful, you can sort of leave that legacy in an ongoing sense that will sort of haunt and hinder your family. If what you leave is good and godly, it will continue on for generations and even eternity. Lots of good things out there, right? And things that are good enough and have nothing to do with God. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't really do bad stuff. Everything I do is good. It's good enough, right? But sometimes, like, we kind of take solace in that, even though what we're all about, what our lives are totally focused on, has nothing to do with God. Listen, where your investment falls along this spectrum from bad to good to godly will determine how long it lasts. Bad stuff doesn't last. Good stuff lasts a little bit. godly stuff is eternal. Isn't that cool? Like, don't you want what you do throughout your dash to have an impact on forever? 3 of us do. That's a good thing, I guess. That's a starting point. That's good. It's a starting point. That's good. All right. Here's the second category. Something that does not last. Right? Because what does the text say? But a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. And I don't want you to think about wealth just as money, but just think about like everything you're focused on, everything you've worked hard to accomplish, just wealth, possessions, whatever, Like if you don't have any good or God in your life, that stuff just doesn't last. It's sort of like what Romans 8:28 tells us, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose, right? God's going to use everything, good, bad, otherwise, for the good of his people. So which do you want? Do you want, and it's a dumb question, right? Because we all want the same thing. Who here wants something that lasts, that outlives them? Come on. Everybody should have, if you're going to put your hand up for the next one, that'd be silly, right? You're going to live your whole life, you're going to pass away, and then everything you've worked for either dies with you or goes to someone else. Who wants that? I understand. Now, brace yourselves, okay? Because it's simple. It's like me saying the sky is blue, but this, for many of us, will be a very challenging idea. This is largely contingent on what you do now. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. It's not what you do later. It's not what you hope and pray and have the best of intentions to get around to at some point when your life frees up more. Almost everybody I talk to who's retired says, "Oh, I'm so much more busy now that I'm retired." Right? So don't wait till you're retired to do this stuff. You'll be busier then, and you won't. Now listen, your legacy isn't contingent on what you want it to be. We all want it to be a good thing. It's contingent on what you do. Now let's just sort of talk about this for a second and expose it a little bit. So let me just ask some questions. Who would like to leave a legacy of health? Right? Just healthiness. Okay. So we know in order to do that, we've got to do a good job of consistently eating right and exercising, right? And yet, for most people, we just don't have the time, energy, whatever, to want to go to the gym or cook. Actually, we had this last night. I took some steaks out where I was going to make this glorious dinner last night. And when I got back to my steaks hours later, they were still frozen. So I'm like, we can't do that. And so do I race to the store before it closes and do this then? And stand on my head and spend. It's like, or do we just call phase 2 and get a delicious pizza, right? I'm not even going to tell you because you already know what we did, right? You already know. We want to leave a legacy of health, but man, the pizza with extra cheese is really tasty, right? Amen. Amen. Can I give you another example? Yesterday, we got word from Pastor Taras in Ukraine that a rocket hit Rivne. They had no electricity, no water. Listen, church, our Ukraine church, our sister church there, they are struggling and they desperately need our prayers. And I want to say that because I know, I say that, and for many of us, maybe even most of us, maybe even all of us, you hear that, and that hits you. It feels heavy in your mind and on your heart. But what I know, because now we've been praying for 7 or 8 months, and we have Converge has this Ukraine fund that over $1 million has been given and distributed to help. And so I'm on these calls weekly, and we're doing this prayer call monthly. And here's what I know. At the time that our sister church needs our prayers and support the most, giving to Ukraine has slowed to a trickle, and our corporate prayer times have gone from 40 plus people to 12 people, right? So again, you might go, I pray every single day, right? Yeah, awesome, great. But like a focused together prayer thing and giving is just, and you know what? Like again, the need is higher now than ever. And we're only getting worse, and this isn't even necessarily connected with the war, but with issues that so many, like literally hundreds of thousands of displaced refugees that have gone to different places, as winter gets very close now, and they don't have adequate clothing because they had to leave their homes, like under the cover of darkness, for the sake of their lives. Many of these places don't have heating and cooling, and so they require heaters and things like that just to endure the winter. Like more is needed now, and for most of us, unless somebody gives us an update or we hear, we've kind of just moved on and forgot, like we do with everything, right? Like things that are important, we forget. It's normal, but we've got to change this. How about this? Who wants to leave a legacy of faith? This would be a good one to raise your hand. We're in church. Hey, at least pretend and then pray late. No, don't do that. Like we should want to leave this legacy, right? And so if this is true, we ought to, going back to what I just said, be people of prayer. We ought to be people who spend our lives steeped in the scriptures. We need to do life as part of the people of God. Corporate worship is an important thing. But rightly, it doesn't take long to say, these things are less and less in fashion than they've ever been. These things used to be the center of our country and our culture and our life. And now, here's what happens with a lot of people. When they're young and someone says, hey, you want to help, you want to serve, they're like, I don't really know what I'm doing, I'm really inexperienced, I need to kind of figure it out, and then maybe I'll help. So when I'm a little older. And then we get a little older, and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy with my job, and I'm so busy with kids, and like my life is overwhelmed, and I'd love to help, but I'm just too busy. When I retire, then I can help. And we wait like till retirement, right? And maybe there's a little window of time there, although let me just be honest, if you haven't done it like your whole life, you're not going to magically start at some point like that, at least very, very much of the time. And then we kind of get older, and we get to some point where we're like, I just don't have what I used to have. Somebody else needs to be involved. And yet everybody else is going, I'm too young and inexperienced, or I'm kind of like middle-aged and I got work and kids. And literally, and we see this a lot, right? Like, because it used to be that church was the center of everything. Now we see many, many, many people who live their entire lives without making much contribution to the kingdom of God at all. One thing that has been a really good gift to me over 11 plus years now is that we here at New Hope have many older people who care more about legacy than they do about their own personal preference or style. And I love that. Because this is true, right? Many of you, we live in a world where for a lot of people, they might come to our church, and I know this will blow you guys away, but they'll come and they'll be like, well, I really like it, but it's just too loud for me. And yet, I've had other people who I'm sure what we do, our style, sometimes even our volume may not be their preference, but they're like, man, I like being a part of something that's going to outlive me and that is making a difference in people's lives. And I love that. I still remember one of the stories I shared at Bob Cowan's life celebration after he passed away was a time where he and Levon were in this side hallway coming in, and he stopped me. I shook his hand, and with tears streaming down his cheeks, he said, I love being a part of something where I see all these kids running around, and it's just awesome to know that I'm a part of something that's going to outlive me. Church, we ought to care more about stuff like that than we do about what our own personal preference or style is. So important. So it's one thing to hear a 40-something-year-old talk about legacy. That's fine, right? Some of you are like, yeah, it's okay, I guess. It's another thing to hear some people with decades more life experience and perspective talking about legacy. And so this week, Pastor Jeremy and I kind of drove around and popped in on 4 people, and we wanted to ask them a few questions, and we wanted you to hear from them today. So check this out.
My name is Richard Van Sickle. I was born in Millersburg, Ohio in 1934, February 3rd, 34. So that makes me 88 years old. I'll be 89 in February.
My name is Lily Bostick. I'm 82 years old. I worked for for Truex Printing 18 and a half years. Then I had a car lot, Bostick Auto Sales, for 12 years. And then I retired, so.
Hi, I'm Charlene. Nobody calls me Charlene. Charlie Fleiber. I was born in Morrow County and drifted over here, and that worked out well. And I am 85 years old, thankfully. My mother was 66, my dad was 59, so I've really outdone them, but they were more talented than I were, so I have to catch up, so I guess.
Well, my name is Weldon Edmondson. Hugh is my middle name, but I go by Pud, P-U-D, not pudding, Pud. So that's what I've been called since I've been knee-high to a grasshopper almost. My brother, for some reason, he couldn't say Weldon, and he was only a couple years old. He was 18 months older than I. And so somehow he picked up this Pud deal, and the doggone thing stuck with me. It's been with me my whole life. I will turn 90 years old this week on Thursday. So that's a long time, and I've been at the church over there ever since the beginning. But anyway, that's a long time to live in this world.
I had 4 girls I raised, and did a good job on that one. I'm proud of them, and they stick by me, so wasn't easy, but I done it.
I didn't finish high school, and then I went to work for a painting contractor, doing painting and decorating for 6 or 7 years. Then we got married, and that's where I met my wife, was on a paint job. She went to school, Big Prairie High School, and they had a fire, and the seniors were going to go on their seniors class trip, but they were cleaning up after the fire to make money to go on their trip. So that's where I met her. 61 years. We were married 61 years. We got married in 1954. We lived in Worcester for a year, and then I got drafted and went to the Army in 1955.
I met Joanne, and we got married. I couldn't help but fall in love with that beautiful gal. She and I hit it off right to start with, and we got married and ended up having 4 kids. I worked at the Pottery for 41 years, and I started there. I worked at the Flexible before I went to the service for a year, and they're supposed to give you your job back when you come back, but I had an opportunity to go to the Pottery and start with this guy in the tool room, which is something I loved, welding and tooling, making tools and all kind of building machinery. We just done everything. But anyway, I was happy with my work there, and I developed some things over there that is still relevant to today. And some of that stuff I'm still making for them over there, even though I'm not hired. I've been out for 20-some years, almost 26 years. After the Pottery, I retired, come home. I set up my little business up, and it's just a mini thing. But I got interested in making these crosses, and it just seemed like always something to do, and something I love to do.
I lived in Mont Gilead for 8 years, and then we moved to Edison. in Edison. I graduated from Edison High School in 1955. Went to work a little red and white grocery store, a little hole-in-the-wall grocery store. And I was 17 years old. But I learned to cut meat, and it was very beneficial in my later life, too. There's one lady who came in, and she had what they call today a lazy eye, and I could never tell what she was looking at in the meat case. I just had to wait till I put my hand out and got close. But yeah, I learned a lot. I had a lot of customers that only wanted hamburger when I ground it, because I didn't put all the yucky stuff that goes in the bucket. That when I ground hamburger, I ground it like I was going to eat it. But I learned that. I learned the grocery business, and then he sold out, and there I was. It was not much choice when I graduated. I was either go in the Army, be a stewardess, which I wouldn't have been a good stewardess, and so I went to work in Galion at a PECO, it was an electronic factory. So I worked there until I met the love of my life, and he rescued me from there. And I just had to learn a little bit of square dancing, and I had him. So then we moved to the farm, and I knew all about the inside of a cow, but I didn't know anything about the outside. So I had to learn when it runs around what you do with it. So I learned that. I've been on the farm. We've been out there 60 years. And it got 2 kids and 5 grandchildren, and it's been a good life.
I went to business college, and I got a degree in drafting, and I went to work for a flexible company in 1962 as a draftsman. I worked there for like about 30 years. I worked my way up to, I was a liaison engineer between the production line and in engineering. I'd done all the troubleshooting on the production line. Then I got transferred down to Delaware. I was down there for 10 years, and I got the job as a service engineer, handle service problems. But it was a good time. Met a lot of people that worked at the Flexi were really good people.
I was in Girl Scouts and attended the MYF at church, and that was always a fun thing. I went to camp, and one day they were having shooting, and they said the shooting instructor didn't show up. So I said, what are they going to do? And this other lady said, well, my dad's here. He can shoot. So they sent this man down to the hunting range to teach 9-year-olds how to shoot a .22 rifle. And I thought, this is not going to happen again. So you have to get certified by 4-H. So I went for 3 days and got certified, and that never happened again. And that was in 1993. And I've been shooting ever since. That's what I do in 4-H now. That and home ec, of course you expect that. Kids change, grow up. I haven't changed. So they said, hi Charlie, and I don't know who they are. You taught me to shoot. So I thought, well, that's good. I got a deer. So I thought, well, I can teach anybody to shoot. Absolutely anybody. You just have to listen to what I tell you. But I have a gun safe in my dining room. It doesn't fit my decor, but it handles my guns.
So when you look back with 9 decades of life experience, what is something you didn't realize that mattered, maybe when you were younger, but now as you think about it, you're like, man, that's important?
What I feel is important now is the most important thing that I maybe overlooked was how strong your faith is, and how much that a church should believe and preach Jesus Christ. Sometimes they don't do that. Sometimes it's like current events up there, and you don't get that Christian feeling, that heartfelt feeling, like you do when it comes through from the Bible and from the experiences of other people.
I thought it was important to keep my house immaculate, and now it's not quite as important as it was then. And I wish I hadn't wasted so much time doing it. I think I'm living my life a little better for Jesus. That is important now. It should have been then, but I guess when you're younger, you don't realize that. And I think that's my most important thing now in life.
Or get a job and do good work. If you do that, people will hire you. I think I started out, I was 16 years old, I worked for a little factory in Millersburg. I worked there for about 5 or 6 years.
If someone asked you, what really matters? What should I really spend my life on? What would you answer that question?
Don't sweat the small stuff. It's gone in a flash, and what you thought was going to happen didn't happen. It's like you pull out of the driveway and you forget something back in the house. So you go back in the house and get that. Be glad of that, because in front of you was an accident that you would have been right in the middle of. So patience is a lot. I learned patience with COVID. I knew the Lord had a plan for me, but I just had to wait and wait and wait some more. But it did happen, but patience was big. That was big.
When your time on earth comes to its end and people talk about you or think about you, what would you hope that they would think or say?
That I was a good person. I guess I was. I tried to be.
When I leave this earth, it's really probably not important, but it is to me that people love me and care for me and respect me. And I think that hopefully I've earned that in my life. And I would hope that they would just remember, hey, that old Pudge was a pretty good guy, so that would be what I'd like to remember, yeah.
There was a lady that I was acquainted with, and I always thought she was pleasant, and she just fit that word pleasant. And I'm not that woman, and I'm not pleasant, but I would hope that you could tolerate me and not be ashamed to be in my presence, and would hope to see me again.
How do you want people to remember you? What do you want them to say about you when they talk about you, when they think about you?
Probably my happiness and my smile.
So much fun. And actually, just so you guys know, Lily's right here. Whew. Charlie's right across the aisle from her. Pud is over here sitting in his chair. And Dick is a second gathering person, so maybe he'll be here between gatherings, but yeah, he's awesome too. And we have other 80-year-olds as well. Some of them didn't think we knew they were 80, but our database tells us this. We only could pick a certain number, so we just picked and we went with it. But anyway, I don't want to single a person out, but this is a very unique week for us as a church. And you heard it in the video, but Pud on Thursday, this last Thursday, turned 90 years old. And just in case you want to mark that, it's October 20th, so for 91, 92, 93, all the way up to whatever. Pud, you said was it your mom who lived to be 97? Yeah? So, yeah, awesome. And I want you guys to know this too. Our surprise for Between Gatherings, which is going to happen in just a number of minutes, is a month or so ago, the Edmondson family reached out and said, hey, we don't want to like make anything about us, but it'd be so cool because for Dad, his church family means so much to him if we could do something. And so they brought in some cupcakes, and we're going to, in the lobby, have some cupcakes and celebrate Pud's 90 years. So remember when I said right before the video that like we live in a world where now when people are young, they think, oh, I'm too inexperienced, and they get a little older and they think, oh, I'm busy with my family, with my kids, with work. And then they get a little older and they think, well, I've kind of lost a step, so someone younger should really do this, not me. And so many people never really contribute much to the kingdom for their whole lives. But Pud, as long as I have known him, has put on a clinic. All right? So when the addition, this basically all of this part of the building that for most of you is the parts you spend your time in, when this was added in 2006, here's a picture, well, 3 pictures of Pud. So Pud would have been 74. He's laying on the floor, doing plumbing and smiling. At 47, if I have to lay on the floor, I don't care what I'm doing, I'm probably not smiling. I didn't know Pud for my first little bit here at New Hope. His wife, Joanne, was battling an illness. But after she passed, all of a sudden, this guy that I just met was here every single week washing all the windows on all the doors in the whole church. He would bring us cookies, macaroni salad, potato salad. I'm like, this guy's amazing. And that was in his 80s, and he was crushing it, right? Like probably volunteering more than literally anybody else in our whole church. Just amazing. And so just a few thoughts here. One is this: leave a legacy of positivity, right? And here's what I mean by that. Listen, the world we live in and the lives we live are filled with plenty of opportunities to complain. Amen? And many people take full advantage of this, especially if they're around close, safe people, right? Trusted people. They complain and complain about how bad and da-da-da, da-da-da. I want you guys to know this. In almost a decade, I have never heard Pud say a negative word about anyone or anything ever. And I've spent a lot of time with that guy. He talks about how he loves his family. He loves his church. He loves his small group. Lots of love with virtually no negativity. I remember back after he got in a car accident a number of years ago, and he looked like a C because his back was messed up and his knee was messed up. And Pud, I still remember praying with you the night before your back surgery because his pain doctor told him there's a 50-50 chance you don't come out of the surgery. And here's Pud with a smile going, you know what, if I have a 50% chance of being able to be more mobile and do things in life, that's fine with me. Still, always with a smile on his face. So many complain related again to preferences and whatever instead of focusing on mission. And I'm thankful for all the people that you heard from today who care more about what they leave behind than what they prefer. Number 2, first one was leave a legacy of positivity. Leave a legacy of investment. We live in a world where we have more and more hoarders all the time, right? People hoard whatever they have, whatever they get. Sometimes that's out of need, sometimes it's out of want. Pud and Joanne Edmondson were our first leaders of the greeter ministry here at New Hope Community Church, again in their 70s. Isn't that crazy? Like, think about that. We just celebrated 20 years as a church. Pud would have been 70 when New Hope started. And again, just still highly involved. Dick Van Sickle mowed our lawn forever. He was here every Saturday running a lawnmower, mowing until he couldn't do that anymore. Actually, back when Dick did that, there was a lot less smoking that happened while the lawn was being mowed. Mark, if you want to live as long as Dick and mow as long as Dick, you might need to pull back on that puff, the cloud of smoke you tend to mow in, brother. Charlie, since 1993, I can't even imagine how many hundreds, maybe thousands of kids you've taught to shoot through 4-H. What an awesome investment, right? I love that. Listen, giving back to family, community, and God, those things mean something and they matter. They do. And little things over time crush it. So if any of you think to yourself, you know what, I can only do something super small, it really probably doesn't even matter or make a difference, so I'm going to wait until I can do more, you are missing out on something powerful. Do the little you can now and it will build, right? So don't wait, do what you can now. And here's the last one. Leave a legacy of faith. This is so important, church. And really, probably the greatest way everybody does that is through their kids. If you have kids or grandkids, right? Like these things mean so much. And this last Friday was senior night, and so I posted a picture. So many people commented and have commented, and I'm sure will, just about Christopher. Man, what an impressive 17-year-old Christopher is, right? Whatever. And so if you've thought that or said that, or maybe some of you are like, I know that guy, I don't like him, whatever. But if you've thought or said that, I just want to say a few things. One, God gets the most credit because God made Christopher to be Christopher, right? Christopher gets the second most credit because we see this all the time. He is so diligent at the things he's passionate about. Like he just works at them and invests in them, and that's really cool. And literally any credit, Bethany and I get, I said that like that on purpose because way more Bethany than me. The only credit we should ever get is for our consistency. And let me say it this way, there's plenty of things in our life that we intentionally are not consistent at. And do you know this? When you are consistent at something or when you're inconsistent at something, you are revealing to your kids and your family and all who are around you what is important and what isn't. So intentionally, there's a lot of things we aren't consistent at, but church and God have never been in that group of things we're inconsistent with. Listen, and again, I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad or whatever, but if sports and preferences and laziness are all allowed to consistently trump God and church, the church will have no authority in your children's or your family's life. I will have no authority in your children's or your family's life. So when you're like, oh, we're in trouble, can we come talk to you? Absolutely, but your kids won't care, right, what I have to say. And you'll wonder why when your kids grow up that they're seldom at church. And the answer is, if you have, as they're growing up and they want to do other things or just don't want to go to church, if you've allowed them to do that, the reason your kids won't go to church consistently is because you have taught them that. You've instilled it. So we got to be careful with this stuff and all the things they say they want to do. We've got to take the lead. One of my favorite Pud Edmondson stories is the time he was at a hospital, I think it was Mount Vernon. He was visiting a friend who was in the process of dying. The whole family was there. And he came back from this hospital visit, and he called me up because he said, you know what? I don't think I did enough. I don't think I said enough. I just need to know for sure that when my friend dies that they know Jesus and are going to heaven. He was just at the hospital. He just drove the 30 minutes there and the 30 minutes back. He called me up. He said, will you go back with me? So together we got in his vehicle. We drove down there and we made sure. And who does that, right? Pud did. Because leaving a legacy of faith matters that much. And you heard all four people say something to the effect of living for Jesus matters more and matters most. So as we kind of wrap up week 3 of 4 for the beginning, the end, and everything in between, listen, church, what you do, how you live right now matters. And again, it's not easy to prioritize more important things when our lives, for all of us, are totally overrun by tons of urgent things. There's always a million things for all of us to do. It's hard to say, no, I'm not going to do the urgent thing. I'm going to do the more important thing. But listen, do the hard thing. The Bible's so clear on this. Our lives, right? I don't care if you live to be 130 years old, right? The Scripture says that our life is like a mist or a vapor. We're here for a minute and then we're gone. So in the tiny little sliver of eternity that we get to spend here, let's make it count. What you do and choose to do right now will determine the type of legacy you leave for yourself and for those you influence. This last Wednesday, I had breakfast with a pastor over at Wedgewing. And as we were talking, people who attended, I'd never met before, people who attended a funeral I had done 4 days earlier, walked by our table and stopped to say, thank you so much. And we had this conversation. And then another family that was sitting behind us overheard another conversation, and they walked out too. It was amazing just how a small little bit of investment over a number of days had a significant influence on other people. And so, church, let me just leave you with a question. If you keep doing exactly what you're doing right now, what will be the legacy that you leave? Will it be a legacy that lasts, or will it just end with you? Will it be a positive legacy, or will it be a negative legacy? And if people were to evaluate it, would it have much at all to do with God, or are you just leaving a legacy of busyness and work and stuff that really doesn't add up to anything more? Listen, now is the time. Now's the time. If you're not happy with the legacy that you will leave, now is the time to start making a difference. Now's the time to start living differently. Will you make room for God so that your legacy will be one that's eternal? And so, Jesus, today I simply want to pray that, as we think about our lives, we think about our church, we think about many people in our church who are older and have lived for a long time, God, and these little things they've done, they've added up to so much that they're going to leave for their families, they're going to leave for our church. What a good gift. And so, God, I just pray today that we would make room in our lives for you to do whatever you would want. God, may we leave an eternal legacy because of the ways we live starting today.